It's 7:09 p.m. I'm going to go ahead and call the special meeting of the Clintonville Area Commission to order. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This meeting is being recorded. It is not live streamed, but we'll post it on our YouTube channel after the fact. This is a special meeting specific to the city's capital budget process. We've been asked to provide neighborhood priorities to the city. And so I would like to share the directive that we got from the city. And then process-wise, I would love to hear a report from our Planning and Development Committee. If Green Spot or Zoning have any committee updates that they would like to share before we go district by district, by all means, we would love to hear from you as well. And then I want to make sure each commissioner gets a chance to share any constituent feedback that they might have received about capital budget in response to our committee recommendations. And the goal is to leave here with the top 5 list that we submit in real time tonight, and we can cross this off our list and hopefully get some great city investments in Clintonville. So Harrison Poku from City Council emailed me earlier this month, and this is the directive that we received. 2024 capital budget input form. This has been sent to area commissions, civic associations, and neighborhood councils. Welcome to the 2024 capital budget input form. This form should only be completed by area commissions and neighborhood organizations. Do not share this form publicly. Columbus City Council's goal is to highlight neighborhood priorities to city departments as they work on their capital improvement budgets this year and their investments in future years. Capital projects relate to physical assets such as roads, sewer and water infrastructure, parkland, fire stations, and much more. We know that these capital investments are vital for supporting residents' quality of life and our local economy, and for this reason, the city sets aside a quarter of every dollar collected in city income tax to finance them. However, these investments do only their highest good when they align with residents' needs, which is why we hope you'll share input on the capital needs in your area commission area of Columbus using this form. It's important to note that submission of priorities does not guarantee that projects will receive funding. Many capital projects can take years to plan and implement, and funding is limited each year. Capital budgets are submitted individually by departments to finance. Department priorities are either funded or unfunded based on finance's management of the overall capital budget. We are asking for 3 to 5 capital budget priorities from each area commission or neighborhood organization. The form requires the prioritization of these requests, with number 1 being the highest. So within the 5, we'll have to rank our top 5 priorities. The form is due by May 31st. The 2024 capital budget, and this is really important timeline-wise, has not yet been proposed by the administration. It is likely that a budget will be announced late May or June 2024 and be up for consideration before the August recesses. This timeline is subject to change, and if we have questions, we can reach out to City Council. But we have had, I think, one of these special meetings the last couple years, and our Planning and Development Committee met last night, and our chair, Eliza Pendexter, is here. Eliza, would you like to present the slides related to the conversation that the committee had last night?
Sure.
Would you like to drive? Well, it's your computer. It's up to you. Would you like to just nod it?
Okay. I'll just holler when we make the next slide.
Thanks.
So, for a little bit of context, we had prior to the message about this directive, we had planned on working some other things on the agenda last night, but we're able to shift those and, based on our understanding of the task at hand, develop some recommendations. These will look familiar. I will back it up a second. It's my understanding that the things that we presented as P&D recommendations for CIP last fall may or may not have actually been incorporated into cities' programming as far as CIP projects go. So if we back it up to last fall, I know CAC made a resolution to memorialize their support of the recommendations, but after that point, I don't think they actually got programmed and funded. So our conversations last night are, how do we fairly and most equitably represent the neighborhood's priorities? And we wanted to start with reiterating our recommendations from the fall that Jacob presented last fall, which would include the High Street study, looking at High Street as a corridor throughout Clintonville, and that could mean breaking it down into phases, but identifying locations that would be ideal for new or enhanced pedestrian crossings. That could mean a lot of things. Rectangular rapid flashing beacons, hawk signals, pedestrian refuge islands, enhanced pavement markings, bump outs for, what are those called? Curb extensions to shorten the crossing distance. Sorry, it's been a long day, long week. Speed limits, we've had lots of inquiries about, are we able to use the 25-mile-per-hour speed zone idea that was implemented downtown based on it being a central business district, and potential streetscape enhancements. That could be sidewalk repairs, gateway treatments, lighting, things that may also enhance visibility for pedestrians and folks that are traveling outside of a vehicle. So we had initially broken this down from Arcadia to, like, we had phased it out into segments, but we really don't have enough information at this point in time to identify locations for any of these, which is why we're recommending a study of the whole corridor to really identify, based on crash data and speed and volume data, where these key locations should be. And again, this is from last fall. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. The second one is the Indianola shared use path north of Morris Road. So between Morris and Lincoln, I believe, is the cutoff before you get into Worthington. The context for this is it has been a desired project for a while. It's been talked about. It has never been programmed. There is a little bit of excess right-of-way, but I believe it's an open ditch. So being able to get a shared use path or an otherwise separated bike ped facility up here would include some drainage work and design work needed for stormwater to make that happen. I don't know off the top of my head the length of that corridor, but that would be a pretty sizable CIP project to connect that. And that's building off the fact that because High Street is the primary corridor, it has lots of buses, lots of traffic, and Indianola will already have the bike lanes on it. It would be nice to connect up to Worthington to have that continuity, and there's no sidewalk here. So instead of doing a sidewalk, we're recommending a shared use path for this location to give a separated facility for cyclists and pedestrians. And then you can go ahead and go to the next slide. The third one, this is what we had discussed in the fall as well. Improvements to Westham Community Center. I know there had been some more recent renovations, not super recent, but in the last, I forget, 10 or 15 years. We've had recent inquiries, and I've seen it on the community Facebook page and such, for requests for splash pads or updates to the playground, updates to the facility in general. So the third thing is recommending a design build study of what could be done with that property to update it and make it more usable for the community. The other thing is we realize sometimes we're a little bit bicycle pedestrian focused, and we wanted to make sure that we're recommending something that would fall under Park and Rec CIP program as well. All right, so on to the next, if you go one more time. Recently we have been talking about Bike Plus and Link Us and Zone In and all of the various initiatives that the city is aligning at this point in time. And we had a presentation from the City of Columbus Public Service Department on Bike Plus in particular. And we were working towards presenting to the city and to the CAC some recommendations for potential demonstration projects. These would be low cost, quick build. It could be temporary to permanent depending on the type of project, but some concepts that we wanted to vet through this group about what we would like the city to think about in terms of mobility, multimodal stuff. So if you go on to the next slide, one idea that came out of this is building on this energy from the new bridges along the Olentangy corridor, the Northwest corridor for Link Us, and then connecting Linden over to the hospital area and the Link Us corridor. Basically trying to get another east-west connection in there. There are some bike lanes on Arcadia, and we know they're building a shared use path on Hudson to help with some east-west connections there. But as you go north, the next big opportunity that's not an at-grade rail crossing is North Broadway. We have not vetted this through the city or this group, but we wanted to recommend evaluating that corridor to see what could be done in terms of traffic calming, from a safety standpoint, but also potentially connecting the bike network there. And that would be to help feed people onto the trail and to connect the two neighborhoods again. The rationale for North Broadway is there's quite a bit of underutilized parking when you're east of High Street, and the next main east-west corridor you have is Cook and Henderson, really, if you're not using a neighborhood street. So those aren't going to be super feasible as far as getting from one side of the freeway to the other. Did you want to add to that one?
No, really just that, this was we can go through the concepts that we put up. So this is the existing condition on North Broadway with the center turn lane. And then this first concept, if you go to the next slide, is kind of showing more of a permanent or like a quick build implementation. But really, like Eliza said, the origin of this conversation around these projects was about like a demonstration project, was about the city has done some other similar demonstration projects as part of Bike Plus. So these were never intended to be capital projects per se, but they could eventually become capital projects if those demonstrations were successful. So here you can see kind of what a concept of more of a permanent installation could look like. This is on West North Broadway. The next example.
Now the center turn lane is used a little bit at Milton and when you get to High Street by the Kroger, but the center turn lane is not heavily utilized for most of that segment. So it's kind of hard to show in a typical section what the whole segment would look like. We would have to have a plan sheet with a drawing, but this is just a concept. It would have to be fully vetted before it could be implemented.
And a demonstration project could also just use a lane temporarily, whereas this is showing more of a restriping while maintaining the same amount of travel lanes on that section. This is East North Broadway, quite a bit narrower, but we have that lane of parking that Eliza mentioned is underutilized. And then if you go to the next slide, again, we're fitting in a two-way bike lane there with a buffer with some flex posts. So relatively cheap build, mostly through striping and paint. So.
And then the fifth thing, and the order of these we did not specifically prioritize. This is just 1 through 5, and we can reprioritize them. But the fifth thing was looking at opportunities to refresh existing marked crosswalks. I do understand that new requests for marked crosswalks have to be studied, and they need to do pedestrian counts and volume counts and things like that. But one thing that we've been thinking about is how can we leverage the existing amenities that we do have. And one of those things would be to remark or refresh pavement markings for existing crossings, possibly taking a look at vision clearance and using something like those flex posts where appropriate if there's not good vision clearance to see somebody who's crossing the road. And looking at kind of quick, but things that could be contracted out by the city if they choose. They could also do this in-house. It depends on their resourcing, is my understanding. But looking at kind of quick build things that are easily enhanced, that don't require a new approval process, essentially. So we have gotten a lot of feedback about feeling unsafe at crossing locations. We know there have been pedestrian crashes recently, specifically at Milton and Indianola and Weber, I believe. I'm sure there have been others as well, but anything we can do to beef up our existing infrastructure and pavement markings, I think would be a low-hanging fruit and could fall under CIP depending on how the city wants to manage that request. They do sometimes have on-calls for pavement markings and things like that. The other feedback that we've gotten periodically is that, wow, the city came in and they did this neighborhood bikeways, but then Blueprint came in and took out a lot of those markings. This would be another way to refresh those markings as well. And those can get a little pricey. The bike boulevard markings, I think, are like $800 a piece or something just for Mark's shaking his head. So those are our 5 concepts. We wanted to reaffirm what we had already presented in the fall, since those, to my knowledge, did not get incorporated after the CAC wrote the resolution, and then offer up a couple new ones, numbers 4 and 5, the North Broadway concept and the overall kind of spread the peanut butter safety, where we have existing markings already, and refreshing those. That's it. Sorry I talked for a long time.
No, this is
That was
great.
really good.
Thank you, and thank you for prioritizing
We made it
and
last night.
reorganizing. Yes, we really appreciate you reprioritizing
Yeah.
the committee's work around this deadline,
No
because we know
problem.
it came between our 2 CAC meetings, which is why we're all scrambled, and I meant to open the meeting thanking all the commissioners as well for helping find a date that worked for everybody. Commissioner Osborne is out sick tonight, so I meant to note that at the top. Are there questions from the commissioners for Chair Pendexter about any of these 5 priorities that P&D has put forward?
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
That was a really great presentation, by the way. You can tell you guys put a lot of effort into that. It's really
First
good.
year on the committee too, right?
Yeah, this would be my second
nice.
coming up this fall.
Awesome.
That's great. I have a couple of questions about each one actually, but they're pretty brief. I really like the idea of funding the safety study, not the first one you had for North High Street. I think that sets us up for a lot of opportunity in the future. When we come back next year, that study might have generated a lot of ideas for us to then recommend actual implementation of things. Number 2 and 2, 3, and 4, I think are all really good ideas, but I was wondering why you guys, are considering, just for example, number 2, the shared use path, funding a conceptual design instead of actually asking them to include, that design into a whole project. So they can figure out, a conceptual design as part of the, entire project. So instead of us recommending that we just ask for funding for the conceptual design, let the city do the design on their own as part of the whole project. And that's kind of my comment for 3 and 4 as well. 3, you guys have mentioned, requesting funds for a design build study. And then 4 was also just for a demonstration project. So my question really is, why don't we just ask for those projects instead of just that first piece of it?
For the West North Broadway one in particular, the demonstration, we understand, and historically it has been true that bikeways have been a little controversial. So the idea behind the demonstration project was to get the Clintonville community behind it through a demonstration project, as opposed to asking for a project and then having issues come up along the way to the point where the project just gets eliminated.
Kind of like a baby step.
Yeah, so, and we had only really been discussing it as a committee in terms of a demonstration project up until this point.
That's part of Bike Plus. So Bike Plus is looking at opportunities for tactical urbanist projects or, sort of quick demonstration projects. So that's where we started our conversation. So that's kind of how, if we had to turn it into a capital project, that's an idea for what it could look like.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we can reframe these as requests for an implementation of the shared use path along Indianola, for example. That phrasing of requesting a design was just based on my internal assumptions of how the city's process tends to work. But we could ask for the actual implementation of a shared use path, depending on if they have internal resources and availability to do the design. They might have to contract out the design if they can't get it done in a timely fashion based on their existing workload. But we can definitely just say design / build or implementation of this, because the Indianola one in particular has been listed in, I believe, the Bicentennial Bikeways Plan. It was listed in the Clintonville Neighborhood Plan. It's been vetted, so that one could go straight through the process and be implemented, in my opinion. So we can frame these however we want, but there was no particular intent behind how we position them.
Okay, I just
Other than the
wanted
West
to
North
be
Broadway one, it
sure.
would need to be studied and would need to get neighborhood buy-in, and there would need to be a parking utilization study as opposed to somebody like myself just saying it's underutilized, we would probably want an actual parking utilization study and communications plan with the residents and things like that.
Okay, thanks, that answers it. I also think number 5 is a low-hanging fruit. It's a really good idea.
Yeah. And I know it sounds cheap and it sounds like it's just paint, but I do know it is a little bit expensive. So that one I think can go either way as something they can do in-house or would be a CIP.
Hi, it's my first year on the commission, and before I got here, I wrote down 2 things. One was Weber and Indianola. The other one was High Street Crossing. So, yeah, a lot of these are things that people in my neighborhood talk about. And my kid went to Indy, and that's always been an issue, that intersection there, ever since the school opened there. So I would perhaps reorder a few of these, just when we get into priorities, but I think they're all just really great ideas. I was in Chicago last weekend, and up and down Milwaukee Avenue, there's now separated bike lanes, completely separated from traffic. And I don't know whether that's a goal ultimately, or are we kind of going with kid gloves with the city kind of, kind of coaxing in a certain direction?
The city in recent years getting behind, in my opinion, getting behind Vision Zero and becoming a NACTO city. NACTO is
National Association of City Transportation Officials.
So an acronym for basically safety-oriented transportation design best practices. The trend and best practice is leading towards separated facilities to reduce conflict points with vehicles. That's just based on understanding that vulnerable roadway users, people outside of the car, are really susceptible to injury or death. So separated, in my opinion, and I think the state of the practice is the way to go. And then the other thing I urge people to think about is, even if you're never going to use a bike, it is a way to help alleviate, affordability issues for people who can't drive, don't want to drive, or don't want to spend money on a car. It also is in line with the city's sustainability measures, but also depending on how the roadway is designed can help do some speed management and alter driver behavior just based on how they're visualizing the roadway. So I believe that designing the roadway for multiple types of users generally benefits everybody, even people who are going to continue to drive.
I agree. The intersections there had, I don't know the terminology, but they had a concrete island out away from, so that the bike lanes actually separated from, and forcing drivers to go around that corner.
And that'll slow down a driver at the turning point by reducing that turning radii.
When I was young and fearless, I would ride my bike on High Street, but I don't really want to do it anymore. And something like this would really help a wider range of people.
Yep, and it usually does come down to parking concerns, and of course right now I'm hearing a lot about parking concerns generally in the lines of the zone in proposal. So we just want to be mindful that we're not, just because we have some bike things on here doesn't mean that we're completely bike oriented. We're really just trying to frame things through that safety lens.
Well, it is a public realm, so the public realm is more than just cars. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Right away is a valuable community resource.
Any other questions for Chair Conductor from other commissioners? Yeah, please.
Greg Miller from District 2, West North Broadway. So
I was looking forward to your feedback.
I have a couple comments.
Yes.
And the reason I really think that we need to push the city to get lower speed limits on North Broadway, Indianola, High Street,
Weber.
Yeah. Okay. I think those, it's very important. We had another accident tonight, like an hour ago, at Milton North Broadway. Just because people are speeding and running through lights and not paying attention, especially this time of night when traffic is heavy. Which brings me to the second point about the bike lane. I know we had talked about, because I've been to so many meetings in the fall, about doing a shared bike lane on West North Broadway, connecting the 2 bike lanes basically for the bike paths. So I think that's important, although I don't want to give up any more lane space to North Broadway because we already have 5 lanes.
Right, and sorry I didn't interrupt you.
That's all right.
I get a little, after 5 p.m. I get a little interrupty, I'm sorry. We are not proposing any widening. That was
Right.
one thing I wanted
Right.
to point out. This would be using the existing curb to curb space.
My question is, I guess my concern is right now with the speed limit the way it is, and if you sit on my front porch and watch the traffic between 3 and 6, it's horrendous.
Yeah.
Traffic is backed up all the way to the bridge. People don't use the turn lane. They start down at the bridge and use whatever lane is available to turn. So eliminating the turn lane, I don't think that would be an issue. I don't think that's gonna be
It's almost a risk to have the turn lane if people are
It
using
is,
it
because people are
incorrectly.
cutting in front of people and thinking that they can just zoom through there, and people want to turn and waiting till you get to the turn lane, and then people are cutting them off. And then they temper square, so it's very interesting.
The speed limit law is a little bit tricky, and it is kind of a little bit chicken and egg argument. But one of the ways to get posted speeds reduced is through a speed study. One of the ways to get reduced travel speeds is to design the roadway differently to encourage drivers to behave differently. So sometimes the way I'm looking at it is the long con is to hopefully get to the reduced posted speed, but definitely alter driver behavior. And one key way to do that is through design and narrowing it up visually. So in my opinion, a separated bike facility or somehow delineating and designing that roadway differently would help affect driver behavior, whether that's a separated bike lane or something else. But the underutilized parking, I see this all the time because my daughter goes to Clinton and I'm in the corridor and her best friend lives on that street. I see people going around people in the parking lane all the time, and that is incredibly unsafe, especially if people are crossing, because they just don't have visibility, but they just go ahead and go around people who are stopped to turn left.
Well, I think part of the reason too, they had that, trying to narrow East North Broadway because hoping it would slow down traffic and discourage traffic.
But if people don't park in it, then it doesn't really work, right?
Right.
And people don't want to park on it because people are driving fast and you'll get sideswiped.
Either that or get rammed in the back up, which
yeah.
I've had friends that cars have received that kind of treatment. But I'm all for, as far as narrowing West North Broadway and maybe turning one of the lanes into a bike lane, maybe paint it green or something to delineate a bike lane that's more prominent, but it's still gonna have to be traffic lane.
Yeah.
I think that's a start. We talked about that as a stepping stone to even doing a regular lane.
And
Something's got to be done.
Yeah, and I don't have all the answers about how it would be designed, but there's definitely ways to design it so it's not just stripe and paint. Even with the green markings, people still drive over them. But if there's a physical barrier, understanding that there has to be breaks in it because there are driveways, but if there's a physical barrier and it's a vertical barrier as well, that helps enclose the lane a little bit visually and hopefully makes people drive slower.
But people run over the curbs anyway as it is
They
now.
do.
Exactly, though, because that's, right now, as it's designed right now, it's designed for high speed. And the drivers look at it and think, just unconsciously, I can just drive fast. So if you narrow it down, like, as you said, pinch it, I think one of the lanes right now 10 feet, or 12 feet wide,
They might be 12.
and even wider on one side, I think.
And narrowing it up isn't always 100% solution. We still have, I live closer to Hudson and we still have a lot of speeding, even though those are 10-foot lanes and there's a lot of safety concerns there too, but it does make it less comfortable for people to speed in that manner.
Well, I think that the city spends a little bit more money as far as getting more policemen on the traffic cops on the streets to stop the speeding and stop the violations. Even the police is conflicted as far as what the speed limit is on North Broadway, because they told me one time that, it's difficult because we have these accidents all the time. Why it's difficult when you have a 25 speed limit on Milton and a 45 speed limit on North Broadway, and I had to correct them saying it's not 45, it's 35. So we need to make it 25, so it'll be 35.
Yeah, I think it's always a multi-pronged approach. It's enforcement, it's design, it's all those the things.
But even with the speed sign there, because we tried to implement that by trying to get people just slow down and it doesn't phase it.
I'm sorry.
I just think
But
that's,
I you know, I don't want to freak people out about the parking, and I don't like to think of it as a this or that, but the reality is without widening, and I also don't want to widen because that just encourages more congestion and speed.
right.
We have to talk about trade-offs and what makes sense where.
Induced demand.
Do what?
Induced demand.
Induced demand.
Increased traffic.
And that was really our goal, was to identify those easy wins, like an underutilized center turn lane, for example, on West North Broadway, or the parking lane. Like those were easy wins to install something like that, whereas some of the other recommendations would require taking away travel lanes or narrowing the road.
And especially if people are misusing the lanes, if they're driving through the parking lane, if they're driving up the center turn lane, that's a safety issue as well. So
We have to keep in mind too that that is a route that's used by ambulances
Right.
going to Riverside.
Right.
So if you don't give anyone anywhere to pull off, you're just gonna, you know, every second counts when those ambulances are trying to get to Riverside.
that is also true. That's why I think a study of how to do that in the most appropriate manner would make sense.
Where are we with, we had a document some time ago about closing the gaps in sidewalks. Where are we with that? Because I still don't have a sidewalk on Indianola from Cook up to Weisheimer.
The URF sidewalk segments, I believe, are complete, but the URF funding is no longer available, is my understanding. So if there is still a sidewalk gap, we could add those as CIP recommendations too. I just want to make sure it's not already programmed. You said north of,
North of Cook up to Weisheimer.
okay.
And this map that we were given some time ago identified a lot of sidewalk gaps. And I think that should be like a number one priority, closing those sidewalk gaps for, you know, parents with strollers and everything else. I think it's important to do.
I will request the status of the URF funded things because it's possible that it is already programmed and just hasn't been constructed yet, but I will request that.
Could the closing sidewalk gap fall into the safety category?
I think so, for sure.
Didn't they start doing some of that on Indianola last year?
I just
They
looked up
did a
our
couple
whole,
years ago, but there's still big gaps.
Actually, I think I have a video that shows one of, that I did not plan this, but, I can tell you, someone who bikes, try to bike east-west, this is the underpass from a cyclist point of view. And this is the exact wrong size because cars will expect you to be far to the right and then, you can't, it's hard to take the lane. Lots of people are tempted not to.
They get grumpy at you if you take the lane.
But you really should take the lane,
Yes.
but you know, and it's trying to go to my election training on Morse Road. This is, getting across I-71 was hard.
You heading east?
What?
Heading east?
Yes, heading east. But I didn't plan, I just had, I saved that video from the thing and I'll stop. But I do want to say that
this is
something.
making me nauseous.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's a head
It's making me
cam.
nauseous because I can just picture that intersection. So
But I
Know
did,
which?
I've ridden, I've ridden through that as a past.
One thing we did talk about in connection with the North Broadway is those connections across the bridge, crossing over 71, and that was a big conversation. Is maybe that could be something that could link up with North Linden and their request.
We have not reached out to them yet, but
Because
we wanted to talk to this group before we reached out to
Is
them.
that state jurisdiction?
Where?
They're responsible for the overpass?
So that will come up because one of my constituent priority items continues to be the 71 north entrance ramp at Cook Road. And there are huge jurisdictional issues when you want to do anything on the ramp, is my understanding. And that one in particular, it's Clinton Township, the city, and the state. So it's like very hard to get anyone to pay for a traffic signal.
For North Broadway, it's underpass though, correct? So for North Broadway, that wouldn't necessarily be an issue unless there was proposed changes to the overpass abutments, which,
The railroad overpass.
yeah. But then going over the bridge, any changes to lane configurations on a roadway that touches ODOT ramps requires coordination with ODOT. That is something the city does do with regularity, but it depends on the project, whether they're able to get it approved or not. There is a big safety contingency and multimodal contingency within ODOT, so they can also help the city coordinate that with the regular ODOT District 6.
I did look up what I had on sidewalk gaps. The most current thing I had was from 2022. That was from December 2022. The city had committed $500,000 to fill the last remaining gaps on Indianola and potentially a few other gaps slated for construction in 2023. Work with Alex Sauersmith from the city for more details and exact timelines. So that could be something we follow up on.
He's
perhaps
in
the
the
timeline is delayed.
Planning division and they manage the URF funds, so that's my thinking is I think there was already funding allocated and programmed to address those gaps. We just need to figure out what the status is. I just sent a message about it, so I'll share with this group as soon as I get a response. If it's not already programmed, I definitely think we should include it. But I don't want to recommend something that's already been allocated and programmed, if we can avoid it.
Are there other commissioners who didn't get to ask questions of Planning and Development Committee before we move on and check in with our other committee chairs? Okay. Greens, oh, did you have something to add, Alex?
Did you want to add the park item, or do you want to bring it up after the?
I mean, it was just an idea, but we can talk about it after here.
That one definitely got my attention.
Okay.
I don't really have much to say, except that I went to there's a grant here in town called 614 Beautiful. There was an info session on that today that I attended, and the idea me and Annalisa have is to do something in Whetstone Park. We've looked at Brevoort Park in the past, but we're kind of already doing stuff in Brevoort Park as it is. But yeah, so people talked about a splash pad. I saw a lot of talk about a splash pad in the park too. Quick note, we are going to throw that festival at the end of August in the park. And so we were cooking up kind of an idea about a public art improvement project, maybe by the kids' playground down in the park, because it gets so much attention. Also just be a great place for something. Kind of by the casting pond. So anyway, those are just some other thoughts I have about Whetstone Park. You're talking about the rec center. We've talked about the rec center a lot in meetings, CAC meetings. But the other parts of the ground, there's the shelter house, Park of Roses, but the lower fields, there is some area for more things that could be done, particularly around the playground and casting pond, I think.
My hope is with the recommendation for Whetstone, they would look at the whole property, and typically what the city has done in the past with other rec centers is they identify a rec center for improvements, and then they go to the community and get feedback about what those improvements should be. So we tried to keep it vague, but yeah, I've heard the splash pad quite a bit as well.
Well, there's so much work that's been done down there too, like they've redone the roads. Recently, they added a bunch of tables down by the outdoor shelter houses that are kind of by the trail on the south side of the fields. So yeah, we're still thinking that over, but yeah, there's room for that. And if we do continue this festival in future years, we were thinking this is a great time to add to the facilities down there. So those are my thoughts. Other than that, no prepared material or anything.
Can I add something to Parks related?
Please.
So, District One, the south end of Esmond Street, which is the next block east of Indianola, right, that ends into Glen Echo Ravine.
Mhm.
At the very end of that alley, there's like a dirt hill that goes down and meets a path, an unapproved path that connects underneath Indianola to the park itself. It'd be great if there was a set of stairs there.
Yes.
Because,
People use
and I reached out to CRPD through a contact of mine there, and I was rejected because they said they already have 2 stairs into it. One at Indianola, which is the other side of Indianola, and from the Glen Echo neighborhood itself. But for me and kids to take advantage of the park, we have to cross Indianola to go down the stairs. And I'm getting to the age where I don't want to climb down that hill anymore. So I'd like a set of stairs there.
Glen Echo Ravine came up as part of the discussions last night too. There was a request to put some sort of litter catchment infrastructure where it outlets under 71 and
Yeah.
then floods the ravine, and then you'll see all the debris up in the trees and stuff. And we weren't sure how to incorporate that because while certainly we can request CIP projects from Rec and Parks, Glen Echo, my street runs into the ravine property as well, but like I don't know if it's university area or if it's Clintonville.
We only have the top half.
We only have part of the park in our area commission.
Yeah, we have the north side of the stream.
Yeah. So we weren't sure how to make a request for the stream itself.
These need to be submitted like tomorrow, right?
I met with Eric East, the District 2 Commissioner from the university, and he has an interest as well as trying to, I know that there's one point talking about the city property east of Indianola to become perhaps a nature preserve, but it's just not there yet from an ecological standpoint. There's a lot of invasive species in there, and there's other properties throughout the city that probably are more significant. But over time, it'd be great if that could become a nature preserve too. That's what Eric, the District 2 guy from university, I talked about.
Well, speaking of that, just going back to Glen Echo for a second. Friends of the Ravines was out there this past weekend doing bank stabilization. That is something that, I mean, that would be great. There's a lot of problems with the erosion of the banks. I don't have any details or costs or ideas even, but, you know, it's something that needs to get.
Yeah, they're along Cliffside on the south side of the stream.
So I think one thing that I'm taking away, this is at least the second year in a row where I feel like we've gotten a quick turnaround request from the city to submit our priorities, and had to have a special meeting between our normal monthly meetings. So I think we do the best we can tonight to identify 5 that we think are realistic for 2024. But I think we have a list coming out of this evening, and we prepare earlier next year and just know that the capital budget will be coming and have a discussion during maybe our April meeting to be super proactive, and could try to do some coordination with the University District Area Commission if we want to prioritize the stream, or with North Linden if we want to prioritize connectivity with that community, just so that we don't miss the opportunity tonight. Are there other questions or comments related to green spot initiatives and capital spending for Ryan? Thank you. Chair Hardwick, I didn't ask you to prepare anything either. I feel like this is very planning and development heavy, but I want to make sure you have an opportunity if there are items that have come out of zoning work.
I'd say mostly the zoning, but I think Commissioner Weinman is right about sidewalks. We keep talking about walkability, but if you can't walk on the sidewalk, or you can't, and the ramps on them, that's a basic decency thing that has to be done, is you have to have places for people to walk in, it has to be accessible. And I would consider that high priority, especially since it keeps saying walkability. And I like the High Street Road diets. I still don't understand why we have 7 lanes for that short stretch. And it's like it feels like a freeway. You can't, trying to cross High Street at any place but an intersection.
Up by North Star, or where?
It starts around, or it goes from Arcadia to around Torrance.
Mm-hmm.
It's 7 lanes. I may be off by a block on each end, but then all of a sudden it gets normal again. and all of a sudden the rest of the world survives. I don't understand why that ain't, so narrowing that one part seems like an obvious thing, because we're never, because it's gonna be hard to create a walkable neighborhood on High Street, and that if it feels like a freeway, especially with that, you wanna go, I live down here, if you wanna go to get ice cream at Witt's, it's you either play Frogger or you go out of your way. And I agree, the West North Broadway is over, if you can find a way to make that safe for emergency vehicles, that's always felt like a freeway to me, that doesn't seem fair to the neighbors to have a freeway. Just my only comment on the bike lanes, I understand that's the idea of creating a demonstration that it can work. Like, so someone uses shared use passes where you don't have changes in signalization, you get you have me being able, I don't know whether I have priority or the car turning across goes priority, because there are actually no clear laws on this. I have asked traffic lawyers and they say, I don't know who has the right of way. And if a professional traffic lawyer doesn't know who has the right of way, then but I also understand the concept of claiming space. This is a bike, we want to get this in for future, there's a value to that as well. But I think if you can put in signalization changes, though, that dramatically increases cost, and that's a strategy decision
that was something that came up with the West North Broadway idea as well, is, regardless of the bike infrastructure and changing the underutilized parking in the center turn lane, is there a way to study the signals and coordinate them so that we can incorporate lead pedestrian intervals at each of the crossings? Even just to study and program the signals along North Broadway for that type of pedestrian improvement would be a cost. So that could be something as well. That's a piece of the West North Broadway corridor study, is looking at the signals and opportunities to provide additional crossing time to rebalance some of the auto-oriented use towards pedestrians, because I know Milton, Calumet, High, Weber, each of those has had its crashes and challenges, and there's a school nearby, and there's icy, there's all sorts of reasons to look at the safety of that corridor, regardless of what happens with the bike infrastructure, in my opinion.
And eliminate the beg buttons, just have the walk zones come on.
I agree.
I'm serious, I think that would be all down High, when I walk down High Street, I just push them just to be annoying.
I do too.
Or I say not to be courteous to the next pedestrian, as a courtesy to the next.
Every time I go through Weber and Indianola, I hit all the buttons. So.
But that's the big.
Well, then you have the bike riders too, on Milton, going up on the sidewalk to press the button, so they could cross.
Right.
It's not necessary. It's not necessary.
I know it's not necessary, but people do it all the time.
But the thing is, you never know for certain that the loops are gonna work. And if you're not in
If
Milton,
the pavement markings are worn off, you don't know the loop is there, maybe.
and Milton attracts cyclists who don't want to be competent road cyclists. It attracts recreational cyclists. It doesn't, and that's the whole purpose of it. And I didn't mean that to be negative. I mean, that's who we are selling that to, is people who don't regularly ride roads and don't want to ride on roads. So it's expecting that you need to consider that when you create facilities there.
Is the trail crossing getting an LPI? Do you remember?
Now you're using acronyms that I don't know.
A lead pedestrian interval.
Yes.
Okay, so if the trail crossing by on North Broadway is getting an LPI, I think we could make the case to look at having them along the whole corridor, but that would require signal timing study.
And in the campus area, 15th and 9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they've been doing that more so as part of their Vision Zero initiative. So I think that would be something to look at as well.
While we're on the subject of Milton, Milton between North Broadway and the library and Westland Park is heavily used by families, bicyclists, and there are no sidewalks. And it's an accident waiting to happen, in my opinion. And there's plenty of right-of-way room too for sidewalks. I think that would be a good place to focus on.
And it's already a designated bike boulevard too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that the challenge there would just be understanding the costs associated with, it's uncurbed right now, so I think
Yes.
they would have to do a lot of drainage.
Yeah, it would be a lot.
I had a woman pop out from between two cars right there a couple weeks ago. And it got a little scary for me.
Well, it's scary, like I said, for families. Lots of people walk down through there, two abreast, on both sides of the road. And people are using it as a through street also, drivers, so it's.
There might even be an opportunity to delineate a drive zone and shoulder space through pavement markings as in, because I mean, it can take years and years to get something
Right.
through design and actually built.
But there really aren't any shoulders.
Right.
Advisory shoulders.
Advisory shoulders, yeah. Something like that. There might be some interim thing that can be done as well.
Yeah.
Maybe that the number 5 safety bullet could include things like that. Checking on the Indianola sidewalk gaps, we can list that under there. Once we verify if it's already been funded and programmed, but we could also look at other methods to use advisory shoulders and things like that where it's appropriate until we can get more substantial CIP projects in place. And I think that's a good way to test it out and prove to the community too, if the value in something, if we were to have advisory shoulders marked from, you were saying from the library to North Broadway, and then show how many people are using it, like here's the case for actually constructing the grade separated sidewalk and.
Really from Dunedin to the library.
Yeah.
Because the rest of it is so narrow and down to Kenilworth, there are only people who use that for walking. It's just too busy.
And it was designed, like the streets are beautiful and the neighborhood is beautiful, but there aren't really any stop signs or any it's all kind of unmarked.
Yes.
So it makes it a little difficult, I think.
With an advisory shoulder, if you're not familiar, we basically strike the edges of the road, and so the driver supposed to use just the middle of the road, not go into the shoulder, but if two cars are coming in the same direction, they're able to use that to go past each other, but then you're supposed to stay out of that section of the road. The only thing is you just wouldn't have street parking there, obviously, so you'd be removing. I don't think there's much street parking on that road anyways, so.
That sounds like East Tulane, we have cars parked on both sides of one drive lane.
Right.
In the middle, and cars approach each other all the time, we have to jockey around parked cars.
Right, people are used to it.
Yeah.
And I'm not recommending that we only put paint down. I do think a sidewalk is a great idea. I'm just trying to think in the years between.
Exactly. Yeah, it's an interim
What can you
thing.
do?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanna make sure we go through each commissioner and touch on anything that hasn't been covered yet tonight, but before we do that, do any commissioners have questions, for Chairman Hardwick on his recommendations and comments? I know we have one member from the public. Did you have any questions for any of our committee chairs? Okay. Just wave at me if you.
It looks so lonely back there.
I know. You're welcome to sit in the light over here. I think I'll just go numerically to keep things fair and even and organized. So Commissioner Lott, I'll put you on the spot. Is there anything that you wanted to bring to the meeting that we haven't covered yet tonight?
Nope, very thorough, and the presentation from planning was great.
Don't look at the current slide. It's draft. There we go. That's better.
Thank you. Commissioner Nutter, District 2.
The only thing I wanted to add to is I know we talked about in the fall about having the crosswalks intermediately through High Street, and I think that's a real need because I see people crossing the street all the time. It's just an accident waiting to happen. Even to the point where across from the new bus turnaround up there on High Street, they're probably doing right there since we have that donation center there across the street when they do training.
The Delawanda one?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's been a fatal crash there recently.
Yeah. So that would be a good place to put a crosswalk, especially if people are relying on transportation, bus transportation, and there's several during the corridor right there on High Street there. I really think we need to really get the city to pursue that. I mean, Worthington has a good setup, and if you have been in New Albany, on, is it Granville Street? Or Route 62, they have a new bike lane in, where it's separated from the roadway even, and they even have, bike lane lights, intersection lights too, in addition to the street lights, so. That's the.
Thank you.
Can I just toss in one quick comment, even though I frequently attend the Central Ohio Greenways, which is part of Morpsey, and there are a lot of trails projects that are going on all over the city, and it's really exciting. I just wanted to mention that, and it would be great if we could add to that with our neighborhood in some well thought out way like you presented. There's a lot of action going on just in Columbus and then throughout Ohio, the extended trail network.
Do you know how often they meet?
I think it's quarterly.
That's actually how East Hudson got funded and designed for the shared use path, I believe, as it was identified on Morpsey's Central Ohio Greenway map. Because normally they would just have sidewalks, and that was important to incrementally get closer to connecting Alum Creek and the Olentangy Trail.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing
Sure.
invites with the CAC listserv, or reporting out even during CAC meetings, whatever's easiest.
Sure. It's not really my
Okay.
wheelhouse, but I find it really interesting. I just like those meetings and attend them sometimes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioner Leah Osborne, District 3, is out tonight sick, but she did share with me her top 5 are sidewalks, traffic calming, bicycle infrastructure, streetscaping aesthetics, and tree canopy. And I think most of that has come up tonight, maybe with the exception of streetscaping aesthetics and tree canopy.
It's listed at number 1.
Yeah, I think that's.
Oh, I apologize. Okay. I think I was setting up my notes during the first minute of section 1, sorry. District 4, Commissioner Kroll.
I really like all the priorities, the way they are. I might switch the priority around a little bit. But I will say that the top ones are entirely consistent with a little survey, informal survey I did of constituents in District 4, and they were all for improving the situation on High Street, reducing speed limits, improving pedestrian safety, burying power lines, all kinds of visual improvements, and then all of the sidewalk work and traffic calming and all of that. All of this is consistent, and I really like the ones that's laid out by the community complete. I would just change the priorities a little bit. I would prefer High Street at the top. The safety enhanced marking of crosswalks as number 2. 3 would be the Indianola north of Morse. 4th would be the Whetstone rehab, and 5th would be the mobility study for North Broadway.
Thank you.
And we also, it's at the very back of the slides, just so we had it from the last year's presentation, is there's a 2020 mobility survey that was done, and it also, that's where those original 3 projects kind of started, so that, we're also continuing to address the things that came up from that mobility survey back in 2020.
I'm District 5, Brittany Bolden. So I did send a request out to my listserv, and I did get some really good feedback. A lot of it's in line with tonight's discussion, but I promised all of my constituents I would share their feedback. So one is crosswalks at North Broadway and High Street and at Acton and High Street going to the library. I think that could be encompassed in the recommendation of a High Street study, which I also would support being the top priority, especially in light of our vote on the resolution to reduce the speed limit. I think it's clearly a top priority for this body. A second was a school zone designation on EN for Clinton Clinton,
East North.
East North Broadway,
Yeah.
is that what that would probably be referring to? I don't know if that might fall under, I think that probably merits a lot more discussion. This is from the same resident. Sidewalks came up again along Foster across from Watterson High School, and a pedestrian push button crosswalk light at that intersection. Sidewalks on Fairlawn, with a note about Watterson parking violations continuing to be a thorn in everyone's side. And then I think I mentioned earlier the Cook Road and I-71 North interchange. It's awful, it's dangerous. I have a neighbor who has to take that street to get to work every day, to take that route, and she has videos of many like near crashes and horrible incidents. I emailed her and I said, I think that we probably, because it is multi-jurisdictional and I've been bounced around, I think that we probably should work with MORPC to try to do something more like cross-jurisdictional. So that's my plan of attack there. A neighbor would really said they know it's pie in the sky, but a pool in Clintonville, which I think came up last year as well. Also comments around having a native plant and pollinator corridor. I think this is something that could actually maybe be more of like a 614 Beautiful grant application rather than a CIP. And then the final one was, and this came up last year as well, animal-proof receptacles at Whetstone Park for trash, because a lot of mornings that trash is just strewn.
That's,
So is my trash.
Yeah.
that's one I've brought up too.
I know for a fact, like, we go to Yellow Springs regularly and they have a heavy lid that, and I think the feedback I've gotten from Parks and Rec has been that it's onerous labor-wise to empty the receptacles. But I would imagine it's also onerous labor-wise to clean up the stuff that's all over the grass. And animals are choking on things. I mean, so perhaps that could be included.
Yeah.
My other like general note is just, I think Clintonville has tended to, we have a really, really robust planning and development committee, and so we have really robust recommendations that I think are like systemic and broad and sweeping, and I think we should continue in that vein. But I would love to have a couple really specific call outs of low-hanging fruit isn't the right term, but something really tangible and small that could be piecemealed off, like a splash pad or a specific crosswalk within those broader recommendations, so that city staff can say, oh, well, we know this will cost $50,000 or $200,000, whatever it is. So that would be my recommendation, is that we call out a couple specifics in these broader, we have room, it's a narrative application. So that's District 5. So District 6.
I want to thank the Planning and Development Committee for their thorough work. I like all the priorities. We moved them around a little bit, but it's really hard because I think they're all good. My main concern would be the narratives, and so I hope that you will help the chair putting those narratives together and making the case that these are feasible and will improve the quality of life. But the high street should be number one. Saw too, and now I cycle a lot on High Street, take my lane, but I see a lot of accidents. And it's all because of speeding and going through a red light. So doing a study of how it can be safer for all would be great.
And I apologize, we didn't put any thought behind the order other than having the original 3 up front.
Commissioner Wyman, District 7.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back again to closing those sidewalk gaps. I think that is the low-hanging fruit that could be done, and if they're not gonna fund those UIRF, we're gonna have to do it through capital improvement. So I think that should be huge on our list, getting those closed. And yeah, a long time ago, I did ask for curbs and things around Watterson. And never heard back about that sort of thing, so.
Are folks parking in the yards?
Yes, people were tired of getting Amazon trucks and everything else being parked in their lawns. That's why they said throwing out rocks and different things out there, so you know, that is something to consider. I don't know if that should be a priority though, but you know, something to consider. But my big thing is these sidewalk gaps, and I would move around the priorities a little bit. and I'm a little bit jaded about studies.
Cause you're a state house lobbyist.
Yes.
I am also, I am.
I was just gonna say, the two of us have seen studies, study committees, and they all go into the round file. So to ask for money for a study is like difficult for me, you know, cause nothing happens. So I agree with Drew, you know, just flat out say, these are the things we want. You know, the hell with the study, this is what we want. I'm sorry, Commissioner Miller. I agree with Commissioner Miller.
On that note, I know Commissioner Hively's out tonight. Commissioner Miller, was that your list? Commissioner Wyden? Commissioner Miller, District 9.
Yep, thanks. I just wanted to touch a little bit on the shared use path on Indianola North Morse, because I am District 9, and I travel that road every single day. All of my neighbors do as well. And you know, that's the only road in Clintonville that is 45 miles per hour, and people get up to 50 up there as well. Recently, somebody reached out to the commission with questions about the potential for a business, like a restaurant, right there at the corner of Morse and Indianola, just up north of Indianola, or north of Morse a little bit. And I think, you know, a shared use path is going to allow that corner to develop a little bit better, but really comes down to safety. There's so many bikers and walkers who travel that road, and it's, you know, we might not go past people sometimes because it's just a little hard to see around the bend, and at nighttime it's extremely dangerous as well. One thing that wasn't discussed, but I hear often about in District 9 is the Ohio School for the Deaf and Blind is there, and then we've got the ravine behind that with you know, a huge forested area that is not accessible to the community at all. Interestingly, at the bottom of Kanawha, if you're traveling east off of High Street, you get down there, it's Rush Run, and there's a creek right there that travels into the state property and into the ravine there. And there's actually a pedestrian bridge back there that crosses the creek at the bottom of Kanawha. There's a fence right before it that's 6 feet tall, chain link.
Okay.
So, you know, at one point, way before my time, people could go back there and enjoy the park. And now, you know, every once in a while you'll see a hole cut through the fence. And so people still go back there to enjoy the park or do other things, but the community has no use for it. And really, there's a way to connect Kanawha and High Street to Indianola at that section with that pedestrian bridge there. Who knows if it's still safe to cross, but I think a shared use path is also going to open the door to that conversation. So that, you know, that's the top of my priority list. Second on my priority list is you know, what we've termed like easy wins or something we can do quick. I totally agree with the sidewalks. If there is projects underway, I think it'd be great if we could maybe refresh that list of priority locations. If they've exhausted all those funds, then I think we need to ask for more. And yeah, I mean, thanks for bringing up the point about, you know, just a study, the shared use path on Indianola. I think it's just something we asked for to be done. I do think, I think a study would help be beneficial for North High Street.
For Indianola, I just want to clarify, I was asking for money to design it, but maybe they can do it in-house and just do a project. So we can change that one to be shared. We want a shared use path on this road.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I think
We didn't need to couch our recommendations so much, I don't think so.
Okay, all right, yeah, great. I do think a study of North High Street would be beneficial to gain ideas for the future, and to locate areas that are a concern, or, you know, it's got to be a robust study. You know, we need to put some parameters around what we're really looking for in that study. So I would hope that if we do recommend something like that, we have an opportunity to clarify and provide, you know, input.
For the High Street corridor, because it was so long and we know that they're not going to mark every single intersection and the flashing beacons are expensive, they're going to want to space them. We wanted to have at least some level of analysis, whether or not it's a formal study, but to pull the crash data, pull the speed and volume data, look at logical locations to address the safety need along the corridor so that, you know, it's not weighted too heavily towards the south or towards the north. We want to make sure that it gets distributed along the corridor. So I don't know that it has to be a formal study, but something to identify those key locations would be nice, I think.
So just to finish that point, then I think if we do recommend any types of studies or, I guess just as, I think we need to hopefully have some opportunity to provide input and, during the design of that study or the scoping discussion or something.
You could put that in the narrative. I know in the last couple of years, the city has RFP'd multimodal corridor studies, and that would include community engagement. That's how they did like Mount Vernon Avenue was one of those projects.
Which is where that intersection that you saw in the picture that had the flex post up to protect the.
That was Mount
That was
Vernon.
Mount Vernon, so.
Every district has been covered now. Has anyone felt like they've missed an opportunity to share something? Excellent. So now we need to prioritize. I am hearing, I've heard a few times that the High Street study is a top priority. I feel like sidewalks might be a close, sidewalks/safety might be a close second. Any disagreement or discussion around that prioritization? Maybe we can try to fine tune those and then move along to the next.
I'm okay with this, yeah.
What do you mean by the safety? Is that the
Can
chief?
we go back to
Intersection improvements.
Okay, number 5 in your list.
So the first,
Okay.
the High Street study recommendation?
Yeah, and we lumped in the
Yeah.
sidewalk gaps with that too.
I-
The it's number 5 on your list.
Yes, so 5 I think is where we lumped in the sidewalk
Sorry,
gaps.
we keep the slide.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
I have already sent a message though to confirm what's funded, so as soon as I get that information, I'll share it with this
Yeah.
group.
This is the one where we talked about putting in if there are gaps in sidewalks, if they're not already been funded.
It's definitely where you were talking about, Commissioner Wyman, there are even transit shelters where there is no sidewalk.
Oh,
So there was money spent to install a shelter that you have to walk through the grass to get to, and not everybody can do that, so that's not,
Try to get up there in a wheelchair.
yeah.
Well, could we, for the sake of expediency and meeting this deadline, could we recommend closing the sidewalk gaps on Indianola with the note that we are under the understanding UIRF funding should have covered that, and we want to continue closing gaps throughout the neighborhood on priority corridors, because I know we've got the map with the different color-coded systems that has.
Do you think we need to provide like a location at this point?
We could, there's nothing stopping us from it. I just don't wanna let that level of detail lead to us like not getting.
If we're asking for non-specific gaps, I would maybe create another item. I know they said 3 to 5, but, I'm just trying to think about how that would work. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud at the moment.
Could that map be an attachment to what we were?
Well, it's a Google form that we can't really attach anything to, but we could provide additional context for each item. They really didn't know who they were dealing with. So we could say, like, reference the, please, I don't know, say reach out to. You know, I don't know if any city staffer's gonna follow up on that
Are you,
directive.
limited amount of characters?
I just tried to see, it doesn't tell you. I tried to just type a bunch of characters and see if it stopped me and didn't.
Were we gonna find out whether that, Indianola gaps were already funded? Was that my understanding?
Yeah, I've sent a message. You were told in 2022
Yeah.
that they were funded. That was my understanding too,
So they
is
might be
they
on the
just
schedule
haven't
this year.
been implemented yet. So if there are locations outside of the Indianola gaps that the commission has already identified, we wanna probably be specific about that.
I think there's probably locations that all of us could think of in our districts that we need to group those. That's why I'm wondering if we can find a way to reserve a right to
Make recommendations.
make recommendations in the future. I mean, we can say this is a priority for us and we'll provide more context if it's approved.
Start from the major corridors, work your way in.
It used to be that they would prioritize areas on the high injury network under Vision Zero and near schools and other community assets that people need to get to before they would get to neighborhood streets. So the Milton one stands out to me because that does have a lot of folks using it and it is connecting different resources. But if it's a side street that's otherwise a dead end, like the street I live on, it's probably not going to ever get funded.
I just am hoping that we can try, I know it's after hours and we're under a crunch, so I don't wanna be beholden to waiting for city staff to respond,
Yeah.
because I know I personally have work travel over the next 2 days, and I don't anticipate having a lot of time to work on this during business hours.
I think we should specifically call out the Indianola gaps as a portion of 5. That way, in case we don't hear back in time, it's documented.
I don't think being vague with it as far as the locations is gonna harm us because I think people will recognize that these are easy, low cost, things that have a high impact as well.
What does R&R mean?
Like repair and renovation.
Okay.
So we were talking about, there's also crosswalk markings that are just
Yeah, I understand, I just
faded.
didn't know the abbreviations.
So do we wanna do priority 1 as the High Street study,
Yes.
and then priority 2, we're going to talk about safety and sidewalk, okay. Can we, I'm so sorry, can we go back to 1 so I can just make sure I have the language?
Are you saying, you're saying study, or do you wanna propose doing it?
This was the study.
This one's the
It's
study.
already known
Yeah,
what
this
they're
is a
doing.
study, it's too broad to be able to say, just do it.
Yeah, I think the goal with this is for us to get the study done and then evaluate it and come back with actual projects to implement to next year. Is that the intent with the study?
Yeah, I mean, I think the length of the corridor just lends itself to needing some level of consideration about how to space out the enhanced crossings, for example. I'm trying to think, can we frame it as like,
I mean, if we wanted to, someone mentioned road diet, I mean, if we wanted to be more specific about what we want the outcome to be,
if
as
it's
far
just crossings, we could ask for just like identify and implement enhanced crossings on the North High corridor.
Is
Sorry, Mark.
streetscaping a term, an industry
Yes.
term? So-
Streetscaping came up on the P&D commission under the landscaping and lighting and quality of street furniture and the desire to have something more like what you see in areas that have a special improvement district.
Studies have shown the street trees along roadways actually slows traffic.
But if we wanted to only focus on crossing infrastructure, which those are pretty high cost items, we could say identify locations for X amount of enhanced crossings on High Street, like 8 crossings on High Street between this place and this place. And that way it wouldn't be a study, it would just be identify the locations and install them. Sorry, Mark, question.
I would like to this be more ambitious. So what I learned from attending the meetings last year is that part of implementing these projects, there's all these design phases, and what I remember then, they were asking specifically for the first part of that design phase that would lead to implementation. And I like the idea of doing a complete makeover or studying complete makeover, not just focusing on crosswalks. I think we should be bold with this particular request rather than piecemeal.
It's kind of order of operations too, because if you do a study for the corridor, that way when you go to install the crossings, you know what other improvements are coming along with it, so you don't preclude yourself from having a streetscape in the future or something of that nature, just because they just spent $500,000 on the crossings, for example.
So the crosswalks will not solve the speeding,
Right.
so we need a
Comprehensive
comprehensive study.
So, how about,
But I do agree that sometimes studies get shelved, and that is incredibly
Yeah.
unfortunate.
yeah,
Can we word it so that it's the technical term of the design that is part of the implementation process?
Yes, I think we can address some of this concern in the narrative, possibly, just how we position it.
So they proposed doing a design, not just saying study it, give us a design. So you're
Yes.
saying,
A corridor, multimodal corridor design.
okay.
But they usually do a study to get to the design, so I'm sorry, it's a cumbersome process.
Yeah, that's not your fault.
Won't that all get torn up when LinkedIn comes in and does the high street corridor with something?
Lincoln
Yes.
isn't touching High Street.
It's on the list.
I thought when they get the thing, Lincoln showed going around. No, it's Link Us.
Yeah.
Link Us.
Sorry.
They basically went around Clintonville. This one with the map they showed at the commission, as I remember.
They have more showed on there.
Alright,
Or 160.
I'm less concerned about that at the moment than about completing this form.
She said so.
Okay, so please select, so I'm going to read the prompts and read everything out loud that I'm submitting, and hopefully I get a receipt once we submit, and I'll share it with the whole group at large, and I'm sure.
Oh, we're doing it right now.
Yes,
Okay, cool.
yes, it's happening.
Okay.
We're not prolonging this anymore. So please select the capital eligibility category request number 1 most closely relates to. Options for each of these 5 are going to be sidewalks and this will infuriate and confuse everyone. Sidewalks and or crosswalks, streetlights, refuse and waste management, alleyways, rec and parks, roads, sewer and water, public safety, parens, fire and police. Obviously, some of what we're doing is bold, comprehensive, and will cover a lot of these things. I would suggest probably roads for high street study to be the most acceptable category. I think, so then we have to it just says, please add address or addresses or intersections closest to request 1. There's no what is request 1, that's just the next prompt. And then it says, has this been submitted before? And then if desired, please provide more context. And then it moves on to number 2. So the structure of this is an awkward Google form. So just so that we're all clear on where we're coming from.
Is the intersection a fillable one?
It's open. So you can just write a paragraph. So my thought was, literally pull this language, fund the study of safety improvements along the High Street corridor, including but not limited to new and enhanced pedestrian crossings, traffic calming, streetscape enhancements from High Street corridor from Arcadia to Chase, and then provide additional context. CAC has long advocated for reduced speed limits on High Street, and I think this is where we say what we ultimately want the study to do. So would request SIP funding for this study to ultimately support traffic calming, enhanced crosswalks,
To support a safety and multimodal corridor evaluation for High Street.
But I do want to get to the implementation point of like what we would want this, so like, to me, that's still kind of,
To get
Broad.
a safe and multimodal corridor.
You say multi.
to implement a safe and multimodal.
I like that.
Can we say, I feel like the crosswalks have come, can we say including additional crosswalk signaling?
And then you said you might take that blurb and put it in the narrative.
It's in it.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
Because I think that says new and enhanced pedestrian crossings, traffic
Mhm.
calming, speed limits, kind of encapsulates
Yep.
a lot of things.
And frankly, I'm not above just emailing this PowerPoint presentation for additional context to the same city council person that asked us for this form. Like, I think that makes perfect sense,
And
so.
we can delete the last like 3 slides because
Yeah, that's
they're
fine.
just clutter.
That's fine. Okay, so that's request number 1. Request number 2. I don't know what category to put it under. I think it is roads again, but sidewalks and or crosswalks, we're talking about closing sidewalks, yeah.
Yes, wouldn't that be sidewalks?
I think sidewalks / crosswalks. Which are like part of a road, I don't, it just feels so,
For this one, I don't like the way the categories are assigned for us to choose from.
there's an other,
I don't know.
So these categories align with the different departments of the city?
no.
I was hoping it would just be a drop down
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, I know, and you even have that on the, I know.
Wouldn't, doesn't it seems like sidewalks would be the most?
I think it's the most relevant for like
Yeah,
the headline of this request.
Yeah.
crosswalks and sidewalks I think are the most aligned there.
I think
So
calling out those specific intersections is good.
these, the 4 bullet points.
Yeah.
I think that we should do that where they're asking for them, but then at the additional context, I do wanna reference the specific Indianola gap and the UIRF funding and note that we have a question out to city staff. I think just noting that is
Yes.
totally appropriate.
Yeah, I think we should definitely document it now in case it's not confirmed to be funded.
Alright, I'm noting all of these,
Could you maybe say like, but not limited, not limited
Yeah.
to those intersections?
including but not limited to, I love it.
Just quickly do the old one.
North Broadway. Calumet, North Broadway. Thank you. Those
Tell
are
them
just
that, we want roads paved, and then 2 weeks later, we wanna be driving over steel plates. That's awesome.
I'll put that in there, because that's not us.
Olive Summit was a steel plate for a while, goodness.
City staff really appreciates sarcasm.
Do attorneys also? Okay, CAC has Clintonville received UIRF funds, that's duplicative, UIRF, F is funds, right, UIRF.
Yes.
Clintonville received UIRF to close
You're at
Sidewalk.
dollars, there you go.
gaps, including, what's the part, it's on Indianola, north of
Cook.
Cook
To Wise.
to Weisheimer. And we have a question into city staff as to whether that project is scheduled. If it requires additional funds, this is a priority location for closing sidewalk gaps. Everyone comfortable with that language?
Yes,
Fantastic.
not that I'm not a commissioner, but I don't know.
You've worked very hard on this, it's fine. Okay. So we got our first 2 identified. Indianola shared use path, improvements to Whetstone, Bike Plus.
I would like to propose that the Whetstone stuff go to the end.
Okay.
Cause everybody wants a pony, but that's kind of, the Whetstone is fine, as far as I'm concerned. Except for the trash bag.
The trash cans and the splash pad, I'm saying, like, tangible low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Can we go back to the park slide, Steven? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's why we have this here.
I know, but I hate asking people.
Is that where you wanted it?
I would second moving to number 5 also because Parks and Recreation or Recreation Park is already planning to make improvements.
That's why I don't think we need a study on it.
I don't think we even need to list it because it's already in the pipeline as far
But they're
as
not doing the trash cans or the splash pad. If they're not gonna give us millions of dollars for a high street study, maybe they'll give us a splash pad
They just rebuilt a splash pad for 15 million bucks
in
downtown.
the downtown one.
This,
$15 million.
this originated because
So
we
it's
didn't want to
basically
only
those fountains
say
coming out.
transportation.
Kids
costs.
I think we need to do
And then
something,
they'll have
yeah,
little
I think there's
apparatuses
a
that'll
The
squirt water
scale of
down on
it
you too.
is entirely up to you guys, but we had heard folks wanting to talk about interior renovations, which are very expensive, and then reallocating what the interior space was used for. So that's why we phrased it the way we did, but if you think it's more likely because they're already doing improvements to ask for tangible things, that's totally cool too.
So I was thinking about in Enola, north of Morse, is number 3.
And you say we construct bike path along the Enola,
Shared use plan.
north of Morse.
shared use path.
Shared use path. But say build it rather than study it, right?
Okay.
Because you said it's been on a number of studies previously.
Yes.
Okay.
Someone who's ridden my bike to a doctor and really took it, that's a scary way to go. You're right about the Whetstone thing. Part of the reason to put it 5 is if you just don't have time to get precise here. That takes a lot of thought and more thought than you have as you like here.
There are a lot of improvements on the way right now required for some exciting soccer fields and, yeah.
Alright.
Some have already done one. Just finished.
Fund installation,
Construction of,
construction of,
design and construction of.
fund design and construction of an Indianola Avenue shared use path to connect existing bike network to communities to the north of Morse Road. This, so then they asked, was this submitted in a previous capital budget? I think it was. We can also say I'm sure, but I really think this one has been on our list for years.
Last year, we did it.
Additional context, I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
It's a major collector or neighborhood arterial,
It's dangerous.
It's high speed.
With no sidewalks, not even sidewalks.
it has a high posted speed.
I would say it's 40.
How much right away is the
It's
city in
45
there?
miles per hour.
Is it basically to the power poles or beyond the power poles?
Yeah, I don't know where the railroad right away goes.
You know, let the city tell you, the city can tell you it's not feasible. But then,
I think what I've heard in the past is they keep saying it's too expensive because
It's
there's not enough space. They've said they need to basically connect it to the road, essentially, like it's gonna eat into part of the road, but
That's for them to figure out.
That is for them to
Yep.
figure out.
Because something's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
well, funny enough too, there is, you can see in this picture, there is a couple places where there's sidewalks there.
Right, so one option could be depending on, and I haven't reviewed all the studies, but it would be fewer conflict points with vehicles if they did it on the railroad side, but the benefit of doing it on the other side is they could reallocate the sidewalk space and just make it wider, like they're doing on Hudson right
People
now.
from the neighborhoods don't have to cross Indianola to get to the path.
I'm sorry?
People from the neighborhood don't have to cross Indianola to get to the
Right,
path.
that's true.
Number 4.
mobility?
Yep.
Yes.
So on this one, we are recommending, there was a great phrase that Jacob used, it wasn't study, it was like
Demonstrations.
demonstration.
Or pilot project?
So that was when we were working,
That's
we were
before
looking
we
at
found
this-
out CIP.
yeah, when we were looking at this as a pilot project to do
Yeah.
with the Bike Plus plan. So, if we wanna ask for a study of that or of a,
If we're asking for real money, that's
Yeah.
not just a demonstration project, it would be a, request to implement a multimodal corridor that considers safety.
Why not treat it the same as the number one High Street? We just wanna do it also on.
Cause then it's a study and then we have the concern of whatever happens to
It's too
it,
squishy.
yeah.
I love multimodal. I love bikers. I love bikes. I love biking. I am very hesitant to say implement what will be perceived as implement bike lanes
Yeah.
on North Broadway without a lot more community discussion.
Mhm.
After having lived through the Indianola bike lane fiasco, I do not want to do that again without a lot more community discussion. I'm not saying it's the right way to go,
Right.
but I don't think we can do that without a lot more public
You
engagement.
could look at it at least for the crossings of the freeways where there's not.
We could frame it as a safety evaluation, that considers all users' needs. I don't know.
I mean, we had the fifth one was safety, and a lot of the intersections that we pointed out were on North Broadway.
Yeah.
So if we wanna tie that in with this, just, bring it in, say, we wanna look at North Broadway like we're looking at High Street, we could do something like
So
that.
we have a north-south and an east-west that are included.
I think the river and the I-71 are kind of like walls.
Yeah.
It's almost like fortress walls that you can't get around unless you're in a car. In the city, Columbus City Schools will bus you just because you have to cross the freeway. That's
Is the, Northmore Park, Northmore Bike Path, is that under construction this year?
It's gonna start this week.
Already signed.
So it really is very similar to what we're proposing for High Street, but the focus is more about mobility
Or safety?
and safety.
I mean, I
Just
think the
cross
focus
bike
is mobility
lanes,
and
too.
safety for both, but,
Yeah.
We know there's gonna be, because of Link Us, and because of some investments in North Linden, there are gonna be more bike infrastructure, and because of the new bridges that you mentioned, that going over to the Montange Trail crossing, we were looking at how can we make a better east-west connection, because right now we have great north-south, but we don't have great east-west
Yeah.
connection, so.
Exactly.
We're trying to build off Link Us and everything, so, but like I mentioned, this was just a demonstration concept.
we weren't thinking
We weren't
permanent.
thinking of, so, because of the experience that we have gone through, so, this would be one that, if we wanna ask the city to look at as part of CIP, we can, but if we also wanna take it back to demonstration level, we can continue that.
The demonstration project was something we thought we could help ease concerns and get community support, because that's been feedback that I've received from the city before is, well, we can't make Clintonville happy, they complain about everything.
Yeah.
So I was trying to come up with a way that we could quantify support and show that something does work, even though there are concerns about it. But I think asking for a safety evaluation of what can be done to change the character of the North Broadway corridor to address speeding concerns and traffic safety concerns doesn't exclude the possibility of looking at future multimodal connections. It can be encompassed in that.
Do you think we could combine this with number one and give ourselves another slot to fill here? I mean, if they're pretty similar.
My concern with that is the North High Street corridor is very long, and just to evaluate that would be a pretty cumbersome and expensive process. So I don't want them to say no, because evaluating both the east-west and the north-south would be doubly so. But that's just my
Yeah, does anybody know when they approve these, is it an all or nothing, or does it then become a discussion?
It's a black box, I have no idea. And like, we begged the city to come back and tell us how, like, we close the loop, and it just doesn't happen, so.
It ends up on a spreadsheet and a GIS map, and the parameters can be
And the spreadsheet, like,
adjusted.
it's not, or this one's even worse. Most of the funding we got last cycle looks like it was blueprint related when I read it.
What they have tended to do in the past is take all of the requests and see if there's already existing requests in the CIP for it. If it's a duplicate item, it might inform the order of priority that they consider it within each city department. Or they'll add it to the spreadsheet. Then they'll try to align it with existing plans and policy directives. So that might alter the extents of the project or the study. They try to reduce the overlap where possible and match it up to other already previously recommended corridors and segments, I think.
Is the city aware of the resolutions this commission passed?
They received them.
Okay.
They received them. I've gotten acknowledgement of receipt from council and department heads. I do think they do break down based on corridor within the spreadsheet, if I'm looking at the right thing. So I do think we probably do wanna keep it separate. I don't know that it's all or nothing, but I think that they look at it that way, if that makes sense.
There are different concepts too. This is about the interconnectedness with the bikes, and it's about the safety of that particular. And then from High Street over to 71, that lane, it's really wasted space. It's different, I think.
East,
Really
west, and
specific.
north, south is different.
And High Street's part of the whole zone, and
And High Street could get a streetscape, whereas North Broadway is primarily residential, wouldn't get a streetscape project.
Might be going too off track with this, but North Broadway has sidewalks right away, right?
yeah.
Could those be converted to multi-use?
Actually, there are
One
lots
side.
of really large glorious trees in those tree lawns. So that's been a thing in the past too.
The sidewalks are pretty narrow, so to get a full shape use path would be quite a bit wider too, so.
You lose the benefit of the trees narrowing the visual corridor. I think one of the goals is to reduce the speeding and erratic driving, and making the sidewalks wider wouldn't address that. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Why are you so polite here?
Oh, I didn't see your hand, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I propose we do something similar for High Street than for North Broadway? For number 4.
To call out the specific intersection or the specific types of improvements you mean?
Yeah, but I could say, as I think for number 1, we had make it safer, et cetera, and we call out particular, or we didn't call it because it was too long, but here we can actually call out particular space.
Locations, yeah, there's really just Milton High, Calumet, and Indianola that would be within our jurisdiction. I don't think 4 is unreasonable,
Safety evaluation of North Broadway intersections,
including,
Corridor.
including but not limited to
there you go.
Milton, High Street, Indianola, Calumet. I'll put it in order. High Street, Calumet, Indianola. Do we wanna mention the river and 71
Yes.
as well as
There's a whole lot you can fit underneath the railroad bridges in a low cost way.
The railroad bridge is the limit of.
It's gonna be
It's
dicey,
an
yeah.
issue too.
Because the railroad owns the bridge, and they're very difficult to work with.
That's why they didn't put the Old Tangy Trail across North Broadway, right there, right? Didn't they, where you cross the river on the trail, didn't they pull it away from North Broadway because it was too expensive?
Well, to go underneath the river,
Yeah.
it don't have enough room,
Yeah. Oh, okay.
underneath the arches
Yeah.
of the There's an arches on the bridge there.
Right.
At the Franklin County Bridge.
Yeah,
It is getting the shared use path though, right, on the actual bridge
Yes.
itself,
Mhm.
so.
there's an opportunity way in the future when that bridge is ultimately replaced to provide a path. We need to-
The two-way cycle track that we propose is on that side, that's gonna get the shared use path, so ideally they would transition into an on-street bike lane.
But we can also table that and propose it separately as a demonstration through Bike Plus. They already have it marked on their
Master plan.
master plan corridor maps. So if the bike piece is making it difficult, I think it's totally okay to remove that aspect of it and be vague about it. Again, our intention of proposing that was just acknowledging the center turn lane and the parking that was where people were driving unlawfully. And trying to figure out how to better use that space and change driver behavior, but if that
I think
is,
we can include that in the context
Okay.
though. I think we can say like, for additional context, CAC recommends city review, safety considerations specifically around, turning lanes and what was the second piece? I'm sorry, I'm already,
reallocating
the
right-of-way space for a, I don't know, how do we phrase this?
Well, I mean, I think there's like two parts. There's the safety aspect of reducing speeds and traffic calming, but then, and also an additional east-west bike connection. I feel like are the two pieces, so, and they go hand in hand, but,
And the time to
We don't-
understand it would be when you're looking at the whole corridor
yeah.
holistically.
And we don't have to tell them now what the east-west bike connection should be, you know,
Yeah.
or how it connects across 71 or the river, but just that it's important.
But we could also note the concern of people driving in the parking lane and center turn lane as safety concerns.
If the city's concerned about corridors, why stop the bike path at 315 and just extend it just a little bit to the west hook to the Montangy Boulevard, Montangy River Road Trail. There's a trail along the west side of Montangy River Road. There's also a trail on Ohio Health Boulevard that's supposed to connect to Montangy River Road Trail, not the river trail. Would that be more feasible then, because there's more connectivity that way?
In our initial conversations, I don't know if it's not in our narrative here, but we talked about aligning it with the existing infrastructure that's along Olentangy River Road and the Northwest Corridor for Lincus. Just to make the case a little bit stronger.
Yeah, 'cause it's a
like the
full corridor.
Linden to Northwest Corridor, basically.
Yeah.
Was how we were thinking of it. So that line on the map doesn't go all the way to Olentangy, but that is part of the intent, is to fully connect.
It just becomes trickier because then you're dealing with.
You're outside of Clintonville.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's like with potential connection to Montangy River Road.
I'm gonna read this one out loud again. So this is like the additional context we're providing. The goal of this safety evaluation is to enhance traffic calming, some safety concerns including parking in the right of way and turning lanes at the intersections mentioned above, as well as planning for enhanced east-west bike connectivity between North Linden and Olentangy River Road. Does that encompass what we're
Yes.
looking to describe? Do you feel good about this? This is your district, okay?
Maybe say Olentangy River Road, parentheses, Northwest Corridor, so they'll
Yep. Thank you for that.
I'm an over-explainer, I'm so sorry.
No, I think city staff like that.
I'm pandering, it's good.
I mean, I would love that. All right. Finally, we're ending with Whetstone. So that will be our specific address or intersection. We're gonna say Whetstone Park. Yes, we would ask for enhancements before.
Splash pad and raccoon proofs for trash cans.
Those are my personal wish list items. I'm not trying to voice them across the rest of the.
What was the feedback on the community center part of it? Because we've requested that. Did we get any? No?
Not that, I think they talked about planters at the entrances. I think maybe something with one of the gym floors and the roofing. They're doing something on the roof as well. Craig came and talked to us about that from Department of Parks and Rec.
So those are like maintenance requests though, as opposed to
Enhancements.
They were gonna enhance the, shelter house.
That's happening.
Yeah.
And they updated the playground.
They're gonna update the pond.
Kids
Yep,
love it.
and soccer fields, they're irrigated and underground, so.
I also want water fountains though.
like drinking fountains.
Waterfall, is it the splash pad?
They could put in, I would imagine the plumbing would be better.
Pond's right there.
It's that disgusting.
With the bees?
Get your filter straw.
The ideas presented at P and D were way loftier and less tangible than what you're discussing, so it's. however you wanna-
I just think,
being vague might be better here.
no, we already have so much like, if we just say we want a plan, they're gonna be like, whatever, we're already updating Whetstone. We have to be specific, I think.
But don't you think that's gonna actually mean involvement?
I think that it's a much smaller ask to say we want raccoon-proof trash cans than we want a bike lane on North Broadway. I think neighbors are gonna care way less about this.
This is part of the context, no?
I'm sorry,
This is part of the context section of the survey.
this is, the address, I said, Whetstone Park enhancements, have you submitted these before? Yes, and then context, I think you could say, proposed enhancements could include,
Yes.
It's, kids love splash pads, parents and young kids love
Put the
splash
splash
pads.
pads
You
there
can
as
say
well.
splash pad.
Could include but not be.
Could include without.
they are going to include pickleball. They brought that up, they are working on pickleball courts. What'd you say, Drew? I'm sorry.
I said to include but not be limited.
Yes,
We're all
I'm saying that on all of them, they're gonna be like, what?
So, you said tear out all the tennis courts and pickleball, right?
Yes, and put it close to people's houses so they hear that thing. Animal-proof refuse container. I mean, if you guys are, if anyone is upset about this, please like speak up. I'm not gonna force this.
Our neighbors have that for their trash cans, and they just wouldn't walk in it.
This is one of the benefits of being chair.
And a splash pad.
I find raccoons in my trash all the time.
I do too. I had crossing the other day. It's disgusting. Any other small wish list enhancements that you would like to see based on your park usage that are not, any bike parking that you would like?
No bike lanes, no bike parking. No, it's fine as is.
Anybody wants to come to the June 11th 614 Beautiful Grant Working Session, we have some, related things for landscaping, gateway treatments, bike storage, forget what else, public art.
I had some ideas about bike parking.
Where is that? Is that here?
It'll be here, well, I need to confirm with the church, but I think so. I'll-
June 11th?
7?
How about the, timber guardrail down on Holbeck Drive, so you can park underneath all the trees between the road and the bike path.
Do you have ideas? You wanna come on the 11th?
I would, I also think it's extremely dangerous when people
Oh.
look over and park under those trees because there are so many people down that path.
Yeah,
Bike
bad for
skids.
trees, bad for lawn.
That's true.
And I know that the CRPD is putting in timber guardrails in the driveway locations. Almost as a standard now.
Any concerns around timber guardrails along Hollenbeck to prevent people from driving into the lawn up against the softball fields?
They're gonna redo Hollenbeck, so, they'll do it in a couple of years.
You're gonna redo it or just repave it?
Now they're gonna redo it.
When they redo it, people will speed more, just saying.
Well, I've been begging or bugging Greg about, maybe making the bike path. That's understanding that.
Let's not put that on the list, and I'll just make a call.
What?
I'll just make a call.
Okay. I'm going to hit submit.
Okay.
I appreciate everyone spending their Wednesday night doing this and their Tuesday night. P&D,
We're nervous
rock
about
stars.
it.
I have to select all the images that have motorcycles in them.
Some of those get
You're right,
pretty
forgot
dicey. I did
If
not
this
pass
kicks
that
me out.
the other day.
It says our response has been recorded. I just got the Google form receipt
Alright.
and it has all of our answers and I'm sending it out to everyone in this group.
Great job. Cool.
Great job.
Thank you, everyone. Any other public discussion, commissioner discussion? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
That-